Welcome to Coffee and Catholics, a Catholic women's talk show podcast. I'm Stacy, one of your hosts, and with me I have...
Hi, I'm Alicia.
I'm Annie.
And I'm Lauren.
Hello, and welcome to Coffee and Catholics. This week we're going to continue looking at social justice issues. And this week we're going to discuss the topic of homosexuality through that lens and how we can create space for our friends who experience same-sex attraction and what the church teaches about that.
A reminder back to our discussion a few episodes ago on Catholic social teaching. One of the themes is the call to family, community, and participation. The person is not only sacred, but also social. How we organize our society in economics and politics and law and policy directly affects human dignity and the capacity of individuals to grow in community. Marriage and the family are the central social institutions that must be supported and strengthened, not undermined. We believe people have a right and a duty to participate in society, seeking together the common good and well-being of all, especially the poor and vulnerable.
And so you might be asking yourself, well, how does that go with homosexuality? Well, we, as a church, a lot of times we say that we are welcoming of homosexuals, but our actions don't correspond with our words. And so how do we let those with same-sex attraction know that they are welcome in the church, but we also holding church teaching?
And there are ways to both uphold magisterial teaching and dogma while still welcoming homosexuals as a vital part of our church. It is indeed we, not us and them. And a lot of times there's lip service being paid, and I'm not going to mention names or anything like that, but we're welcoming of homosexuals within our community, and we want them, to feel welcome and loved here and a part. But literally nothing is being done to actually create a space where that welcoming could actually take place. And I'm not suggesting that we change anything per se in terms of how we approach family ministry, but I do think it warrants councils being convened at parishes to discuss how are we going to truly evangelize and catechize our gay brothers and sisters who have chosen to live a life that is celibate, who are experiencing this same-sex attraction, but who do want to fully participate in the life of the church and live without sin and live chastely within that struggle that they are in. There are a lot of these individuals within our family, and they don't feel comfortable around us. And I think that's because we're just not really listening, and we're not looking at what we can do to include these people, these humans, these friends and family and brothers and sisters of ours in the life of our parish and in the life of our church, without compromising one tiny inch on the truth, the reality of the sanctity of marriage and the sanctity of the human person. There is a way to do it. We can do it. We just aren't doing it. What we are doing, however, is what's happening a lot is that we have false teachers within the church who are promising things that this could change, that this is going to be something that's going to change within church dogma. And this is a lie and a myth. And these teachers are promoting these kinds of ideas, which are actually destructive and the cause of great despair, when what we really need is to begin to understand the struggle here and bring each other in and truly evangelize. Alicia is so passionate about evangelization. She's so passionate about bringing people in, and she's inspiring. And we're talking about this. I know that she has a true heart to really engage people in a personal encounter with the love of God in their life. And I really wish that we all had that kind of passion towards people who we are intimidated by, or maybe don't know how to handle or don't have answers to their problems. So I think we could work harder as a church.
Yeah, I mean, I think that first and foremost, that when we're talking about this topic, and you guys definitely like touched on it, is that, you know, people who experience same-sex attraction, it's not an us, them, us, you know, an us, them type situation. We are all created by God. We're all part of the human race. We are all made with dignity. And so regardless of what you experience in life, and regardless of even what you do, you still have that dignity there. That people, regardless of whether or not they have heterosexual or homosexual tendencies, you are worth being loved. Mm-hmm. And God loves you, and he commanded us to love one another. And that goes without condition.
One of the things that when I was listening to Lauren and listening to you, also going back to the theme of life and dignity of the human person, you just said it, they have dignity because they're created by God. And I think sometimes we forget that everybody, because they were created by God, has that dignity. And it's good that you exist. Mm-hmm. Just, we all struggle with something. It's good that you exist. And I have, Made for Love by Father Mike Schmitz right in front of me, and he writes that several times in this book, that it's good that you exist and that you are one of us. So a lot of times when we view this, like you said, it's us versus them, when it really needs to be looked at as we are one body, and how are we going to treat the part of our body that feels disconnected.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think one way is to be very clear about what the church teaches about homosexuality, because there are a lot of myths that go around saying that the church condemns people with same-sex attraction, and those who live it out, that they aren't welcome, and so forth. But what the church really teaches is that having an attraction towards something is not a sin. Mm-hmm. It is considered, and this type of verbiage I think can be off-putting for some people, but bear with me. It is considered a disordered attraction, mm-hmm. But that's not said in a way of like a demeaning type of verb there. What it means is that we are ordered towards certain things. So for instance, biologically, we are ordered toward a man and a woman coming together and, reproducing. We're ordered toward because, God made Adam and Eve and all of that, and that complementary union. We are ordered toward that. And so if you do something that is in opposition to, or you have a feeling in opposition to how we were meant to be ordered, then that's why it's disordered. It's not that you are dirty or you are, wrong in a morally insufficient way for having that attraction. It's just that it is against the order by which God meant for us to have. And I know that like a lot of people will say, well, then why did God give me these feelings, right? Like, why do I have these feelings when, if God didn't want me to have them? Well, I think because of sin, it's not God giving you those feelings. We have, for instance, I have an attraction towards sugar. I mean, obviously we're not talking about sexual here, but I have an attraction towards sugar, and I tend to want it way more than I ought to. I'm not comparing, I'm just using this as an analogy. But, that is kind of a disordered thing or whatever. Like, I have a bit of an addiction towards it. It's not that God made me have that. It's just that this is a tendency that I have. And for instance, and I will divulge this here, I have had same-sex attraction before. Mm-hmm. Back when I was in high school, mm-hmm. I had a friend who I was attracted to, and I didn't grow up in a home where, any kind of Christian theology told me that this was like a disorder type thing. It very much probably would have been, it probably would have been a surprise to my parents, but I don't think it would have been, I would have been shunned or anything like that. And if my friend would have been willing, I very well probably would have entered into a relationship with her. But, that ended up not happening. And I'm grateful for that, because it didn't lead me down a road where, I would have been more confused about my sexuality and such like that. But, I say this not just to tell the story, but to say that, like, you know, I'm looking back, like I've used to feel kind of ashamed about that story, but now I just realized that, you know, like I had an experience and I had an attraction, and it was something that happened, and I'm not dirty for it, and I'm not, you know, gross for it or anything like that. Like I had the attraction. And so what the church teaches, going back to that, is that, you know, you can have those attractions, yes, but we have license to whether or not we're going to engage those by, you know, thinking about them or whatever, having lustful thoughts and such like that, and actually engaging in those acts that we think about. And so that's where the line is drawn in the Catholic Church, because of the sexual union. Because you can love somebody.
Sure.
You can absolutely love another person of the same sex. It's the engaging in the sexual act that is where the line is drawn.
And the church's teaching on chastity is across the board the same for everyone, whether you're single, straight, gay, or married even. We are to be chaste within all aspects of our state of life, regardless of our attractions or where we are at. And the nature of attraction, the science behind attraction, there's so much that goes into that. It could even be, you know, anything in your environment, to hormone disruptions, to just a natural disposition that you were born with. There's so much that goes into why we are all attracted to these certain things that we are, and why we have these certain different bents in our concupiscence. And it's all part of the fall, and it's part of living in a sinful world. It has nothing to do with something that God has given us or allowed us to, you know, as part of some sort of sick game that he wants to play. I hear that a lot. You know, was he just playing a game with me then? Is he trying to prove something? Is it like a chess game? That has nothing to do with it. We live in a world that is marred by sin. It's groaning. All of creation is groaning. And church law, we have to remember, is completely built out of natural law as well. I mean, this is an ordered teaching. This isn't a teaching that is just purely religious. This is based out of a natural, scientific, evidence-based natural law that church teaching flows from. Because in another thing that we hear is, well, we see cases of this in nature or variants of this in nature, but we are not just aspects of physical nature. Human beings are body-soul composites. We are both spiritual and natural, and the laws that apply to us are different than laws that are in nature. If you could even make a case for that, really, once you actually start digging into it, it tends to fall apart, even from a scientific perspective, this argument. But we cannot compare ourselves. We are not just animals, and we don't function just as animals. There's something inside of us that is part of the divine nature. It literally dwells within us. There are pieces of heaven in baptized Christians that are walking around. This world is a spiritual and physical mashup, for lack of a better word. And so when we're talking about attraction, we're talking about love, and we're talking about chemistry and identity is mixed into there. There's so much here about what is the true nature of love. I wish we would talk more about that. You know, like, what is really love? What is married love? Is it all eros, or is it phileo? Is it friendship? I mean, let's really, as a church, delve into the nature of the love of God and all of the ways that it presents itself in human experience, you know, because we have the different types of love. In my marriage, friendship plays a huge part of our entire connection. And man, do you have to rely on that when you have a screaming baby. And the eros part of that is just gone. And there's like not a lot of attraction, you know. But thank God that that's not the only love that my heart is able to engage in a deep way, because I need my husband's friendship. I need his partnership. I need to be able to work with him. And so it's just a little example of how I think that we sell a limited bag of goods when we talk about love in only the realms of sexual or eros, married or not married. I think that we need to really I think as humans, especially modern humans, I'm going to go ahead and say postmodern humans. We're living in a postmodern society, a post-Christian society. I think the discussion about the very nature of love and how that could transform our discussion about homosexuality too. Because if anywhere you're welcome in this world, if anywhere you're welcome, it's in the Catholic Church, okay? Because we value friendship. We have entire orders of same-sex people who go to live in convents together in community, okay? We value communal friendship, love. We value that sense of beauty between people of the same sex, love of the same sex, cooperation, not in a sexual way, but to show that there's a place for this type of discussion here. We value that in the Catholic Church. Fraternal, that's the word I was trying to get to, and I just couldn't get there. Fraternal love. You know, that love between brothers that is so deep and so pure. Let's have those discussions and see if we can understand each other better when we have different experiences of love.
I love how you said that, Lauren. Like the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops and their ministry to persons with a homosexual inclination. I just loved this quote. True friendships are not opposed to chastity, nor does chastity inhibit friendship. In fact, the virtues of friendship and of chastity are ordered to each other. Mm-hmm. And just like that focus that you were saying on that friendship and that type of love, and that we can have in that communal love with each other, like and looking at the different types of love and the way that we can, love each other within our community in a chaste way. Yeah. Like I just thought that was really beautiful.
And being able to see each other that way.
Yes.
Let's see our brothers and sisters with that lens of God's love. Look at them the way He looks at them. Look at them. What would move in Jesus' heart? What would stir around? What do you think His response would be? These are the type we have to allow ourselves to enter into the love of God and let it enter into us.
Well, when you bring that up, so had already been thinking about how in English, we just have the word love, but there's different levels of love. And then you just said, how would Jesus respond? Well, I think we know how He would if we look at the woman at the well.
Exactly.
I mean, He was very open to telling her that, He was the Messiah. They were engaging in a marital proposal, and He is telling her to sin no more afterwards. He didn't condemn her for all the things that she had done.
He invited her.
He outstretched His hands and invited her in a marital type relationship with Him. Yeah. A chaste relationship with Him.
Mm-hmm. And that's one thing we're not doing. We always say that we're going to the margins. We always say, but look at our Lord's life. He was not interested in the norm. He was always looking. His eyes were scanning the horizon. Even the Bible even says in the Old Testament that the eyes of the Lord roam throughout the earth, searching for one whose hearts are upright toward Him. Jesus went to the margins in a lot of ways. He was extremely controversial in the people that He talked to and reached out to and evangelized. And He did not care. The love of God compels us.
Well, I think this, a lot of times we treat homosexual love or attraction or even lust differently than homosexual lust, and it is the same. When we heterosexual lust, and it is the same. I mean, if we had an issue, we're all married, but if we had some sort of lustful thoughts, we would go to confession. Mm-hmm. And that is offered to our Catholic brothers and sisters who have same-sex attraction as well. You go to confession, and a lot of people are like, well, I might do it again. Well, that's the struggle. If we do it again, we go to confession, reconcile, and try to do better. And I know that some people get upset. Well, if you're just going to keep doing it, then what's the point? But that's not the point.
Not the teaching of the church.
Yeah, right.
Well, and
go to Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what do you want? Like, do you want a new sin? Like, it's not a bad thing.
I love that.
Like, it's not a bad thing that you're going back. It's the fact that you are... Because the whole point of reconciliation is that you fall. and then you run back into the arms of Christ. It's not you fall, I have to go and beg and for forgiveness and grumble and feel all the shame and all that stuff. No, like that's not what it's about. It's about letting go, giving it back to God and saying, God, this is where my weaknesses lie. I need your grace in order to overcome them. And this is a slow process. It just is. I think very rarely God just like snaps it in us where we don't do it anymore, or we don't feel that way anymore, or whatever.
And we're all called to be saints, like all of us, and we're all struggling with different things. But and we all fall and we all go.
Confession is the healing, the doctor. Like this is where your wounding is going to be healed. Is in confession. I think we forget that we are encountering Christ every single time we step into that confessional. He literally comes to confession with you to absolve you. He is looking for you. He is waiting for you, not to make sure you know how sinful you are, but to heal you and to heal me of my wounds. And which most of us, our sin struggles are directly related to wounds in our spirit. And let me tell you something, you can try your whole life to overcome that. Good luck. The only thing you can do is that when something has become twisted up inside of me, is to go to the person who made me untwisted and have him undo that. And it may take a long time because pain is deep and our souls get scarred. I mean, it's like Alicia said, she's like, what do you want, some other struggle? I mean, maybe you do. Maybe you would much rather have another struggle. And I don't mean to minimize that. But the truth is that the only person who can actually do anything to take away those woundings and those struggles is the person of Jesus Christ. And where you encounter him is in the sacraments.
Well, and I do want to make the point to say that I don't think any of us are bringing up this point to say that if you pray and if you go to confession, those attractions will go away.
Right. No.
I've heard people's stories before, and there have been some people who have said, like I don't have those attractions anymore. And then there are other people that I've listened to who were, in many same-sex relationships, and now they're not, or they're living a single life, or they're married to somebody of the opposite sex, but they say they still struggle with those attractions, and those, I guess, more so the lustful feelings. And so it's, and that's, I think the point that I want to say is like, that's okay. Like it does, like I said before, it doesn't make you dirty. It doesn't make you wrong or anything like that. It just means that you're a human being and you have an attraction, and having the attraction again is not a sin. Struggling with the lust and thinking about those things and all this stuff, that is where it's an issue.
And I've had friends who are gay or lesbian have gone to confession, and the priest told them that they weren't welcome there. And I want to urge you to maybe go to another priest if that's the case, because Jesus is there, but so there is also a man there, and the priests are men who struggle and with their opinions and their and views of church teaching also.
And sometimes can be poorly catechized too, even priests.
And we love them, but if you were told you weren't welcome by a priest, I would urge you to go to another priest. And I'm not saying that go until you find somebody that agrees with you on everything, but somebody who's going to help you heal from your wounds, not create more. If that makes any sense.
I'd also highly recommend the book that we've all been reading and we've mentioned here several times, Made for Love, Same-Sex Attractions in the Catholic Church by Father Mike. Not just for those who may be experiencing this themselves, but also for those whose family members. He has some really great question and answers in the back for some practical, more practical advice on how to deal with different situations.
Yeah, well, and he also has really good speeches as well that the book is based upon. So yeah, if you go on YouTube, he has them on there. They're absolutely excellent. And I will say, this is one teaching that attracted me to the Catholic Church, because coming from like no faith at all, and, you know, having met people who were gay, and the only, like, you know, quote unquote Christian, like, view that I had heard about this issue was, like, basically very condemning. And it was, you know, that they're all going to go to hell if they don't, you know, confess their sins or repent and all that kind of stuff. And it really bothered me, because I knew from experience, knowing people who even outside of this, who just weren't Christian, there were people who were really, they were lovely people and they really cared. And so to see people condemning people like that really bothered me. So that being the only really, like, alternate viewpoint, as opposed to, like, you know, there was, you know, accept fully and encourage and embrace and, you know, all of that, everything that has to do with, like, same-sex attractions and a homosexual lifestyle. And then the alternative, the only other alternative I heard was, you know, completely condemn, like, you know, just complete opposite end of the spectrum. It really bothered me. So when I learned about the church's teaching that no, like I've said multiple times, that the church's teaching really upholds the dignity of the person. It points out the sin, but upholds the dignity of the human being. So
I think it's so important that you brought that up, because one thing we have said consistently on this podcast from the very beginning is we are not here to give pat answers to incredibly complicated and difficult problems. We are not here to say this is how you fix the struggles that you have. We're here to point you to the one that can accompany you through all of that, whatever that looks like. And that is what the church is here for too. We are here to enter into the life of God, whatever we are dealing with. I have a history of addiction. There are days, there are periods, there are weeks where all I can think about is using. And I'm going to be real honest with you guys, it comes up all the time. In my head, there are points in my life, there are weeks and months where this comes up a lot. And I have not. It's always there. But you learn that point, that entry point where you feel so weak and so ridiculous. Why do I still feel this way? It's ridiculous. I've been sober for this many years, or I haven't done this for this many years, or I've had victory in this area for so long. To try to escape human struggle is to cease to be human. This is what we're here for, is to learn to surrender those points of weakness that we struggle with, those things that we don't tell anyone, those things that we just wish weren't a part of, you know, our struggle. Those are the areas through which the grace of God meets us. Those are the points of entry for supernatural aid. And I know this because I've experienced that in my life in a lot of different areas, particularly in those areas that I've struggled with in the past and still think about and struggle with sometimes now, wanting to do those things again. That's vulnerable and that's real. And I'm just being honest with you guys. You know, I'm a Catholic speaker. I'm deep in the life of prayer. My whole life is ordered around the church. And I still struggle with the desire and the attraction to things that make no sense to me spiritually, but my body and my mind do still remember those things. And still, so please just know that we are not sitting here saying, oh, well, you can pray the gay way, or, just be friends. We're not trying to give you pat answers here. We're trying to enter into the struggle with each other, all of us together, the whole us. And that includes our brothers and sisters who struggle with same-sex attraction.
Well, and I just want to bring up a point that Stacy, you had made. And it doesn't happen often that we disagree with one another on this podcast, but I'm going to disagree here. So earlier you had said that, same-sex attraction is really the same as heterosexual attraction. But I would actually beg to differ.
It wasn't the attraction, it was the lust.
The lust. Oh, I see what you're saying.
So the sin of lust is the same, not the attraction itself.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, and the reason why, I'm glad you clarified. And the reason why I brought that up is because I've heard many people say, well, what's the big deal? Because love is love, right? Mm-hmm. Lust is lust. Attraction is attraction. So what does it matter? Mm-hmm. But when we're talking, like I had mentioned before, when we're talking about how God has ordered the world and how it ought to run, but because of the fall, it runs a little differently here. that, we are ordered towards heterosexual attraction, but we experience same-sex attraction. And so it's not just that, lust is lust. It doesn't matter who you engage with or whatever, because as long as you have consent, then that's it. I think that the point that I want to make is that sex is more important than that. It's more meaningful than that. And the world says, and I've heard it many times, that the church is obsessed with sex. Like, why do they care so much what I do in the bedroom, right? But I would actually argue that the world is the one that's obsessed with it. You see it absolutely everywhere.
Yes.
And to go further than that, to kind of get more specific, for instance, like, I have heard on more than one occasion this sentiment that if two men are emotionally close to one another, they must be gay. There must be an attraction there, right? There's no room in the world for men to have a close emotional connection without something else going on. In addition to that, the world celebrates people coming out as gay or bisexual or non-bi, all these things now. But it condemns when people decide, the other way. I'm not going to engage in these homosexual acts anymore, and instead I'm either going to be chaste or I'm only going to be in heterosexual unions. It condemns that. So I would say the world is very much obsessed with it, and what the church is obsessed with, if you can say that, is upholding the dignity of what love and sex are actually for.
Yes.
That love is not just about having sex and all of that. Love is willing the good for another for their own sake. That is what it is. It is a self-sacrifice that you make for another person, to put aside anything that you want, anything that you may even need for the good of that person. The ultimate good would be, receiving heaven. And upholding the dignity of sex in that it's not just about consent. It's not just this biological, this physical thing that we undergo. There is an element to it that is deeper than skin deep. It makes an emotional connection there. You can't get past that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that too, because I was just thinking about, we're talking about attraction. So usually when we are attracted to something, there is something, it's not always a desire, but sometimes it's just a recognition of beauty. And I think that our society, like you said, has twisted a lot of that if we recognize beauty in somebody or something, that we must have it. And just because you recognize the beauty in something doesn't mean you have to obtain it. You can just acknowledge it for what it is. Like, I can look at another woman and say, she's beautiful. Wow, look at how God created her. And that doesn't mean that I necessarily want to engage in a sexual relationship with her. But I can still appreciate her for how God formed her. I think a lot of times when we have issues in society, it's because we've taken a truth, or not necessarily us, but maybe, but there's a truth that's been taken and it's been twisted. And, we see that, was it the Screw Tape Letters of C.S. Lewis? He talks about how it's so easy the devil or the little demons are talking to each other, and he's talking about how it's so easy to trick man, because you take a truth and then you twist it around. And I see that a lot. So just because you see beauty in something doesn't mean that you don't have to possess it, I guess.
Well, and not only that, like, just because you see beauty in it doesn't mean that you are attracted to that thing in a sexual way.
Yes.
Yeah, and so therefore you are, just because you see, like you said, a woman and you go, wow, she has a beautiful body. That doesn't mean like, I thought that must mean that I'm gay. Yeah, that does not what that means. You might have that feeling, but just because you thought that thought, or you have that feeling towards somebody, like, wow, she's beautiful, that's not what that means.
Yeah, so I think it begs mentioning here too that, like, I'll take it even a step further. Like you said, you can look at another woman and say, she has a beautiful body, she's very sexy. I want that. That's where it is. There's a line where you step and you say, that needs to be mine. Like you said, I must possess it. This is where the disorder happens. When we have to possess everything that we desire that is disordered. This is where the break, and that spiritual, that's when the bend happens. The difference between realizing a thought and a feeling that you're having and enthroning it as the only thing going on in your life. We see this a lot with these identity discussions. I am fill in the blank, whatever. And this is the only aspect of your identity.
And I think that there could be two people of the same sex that mutually love each other in the fact that they want to obtain the good for the other.
Right.
And maybe they cohabitate, but that doesn't mean that they are engaging, like you said earlier. I mean, we have whole communities of nuns. That doesn't mean that you also have to be a nun or a monk to live with somebody that you love celibately. And in a good way, and willing the good of the other. You don't have to want to obtain a sexual relationship with them to love them.
I would say that if you are having a sexual attraction to another person of the same sex, though, to live with them would be a very near occasion of sin.
Which is the same for heterosexuals.
Yeah, for sure. Again, chastity across the board. Yeah. So, I understand what you're saying, though, that you can love, again, it's that enthronement of eros that's all over, like you said, just the worship of sex and the disordered understanding of what it's for. And also, we're more than just our desires. That's another thing we need to talk about. Also, let's talk about the spiritual aspect of this, the element of the fact that it is a known fact that if you are a Christian, or really any human, you do have a lover who is ravenously seeking you in the Lord, who is hunting you down, who is looking for you and begging you and painting the sky across the sky with stars to try to get your attention. But you also have an enemy who does not want you to see him. And not every thought that we have, and I'm talking to everybody now here, not just people who struggle with this or that. Not every thought that we have, A, comes from us, or B, is a thought that we should entertain. And I know that's shocking in our society to suggest that my thoughts and my feelings are not the most important thing in my interior life. You're wrong on that. It's not. We don't have to enthrone every thought or desire or entertain it or have it come to lunch with us. You can reject things right out if they don't make sense when it comes to what you know to be ordered natural law and church law and truth. That's what we call the power of the will, and that is something that God can strengthen in us as we frequent the sacraments, particularly of confession. The strength of the will, the ability to be supernaturally empowered at that hinge of your weakness that you think is what takes you away from God is actually the entry point for the power of God to be seen in you. That's scripture. That's it right there. So I love that you brought that up, that it's the dignity of love and the human person that's being protected here, not just, a blanket idea of consent. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, not just, we have this idea, or we have this teaching in Christianity because, it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Right. I've heard that before.
Ridiculous phrases.
And that's the thing, that I think it comes from people who, they are well-meaning and they know what the Bible teaches, but it's, they maybe haven't gone quite as deep as figuring out, it is what we've discussed. But and I will say this is one thing that I want to make sure, I've heard people talk about, and I've known people before who, came out to their parents as gay and then they were rejected, kicked out of the home or whatever else. And it's awful. It's so sad. And so this is one thing for my children, I want to make sure that they understand that this is, I always want to come about these things with so much love for my kids and for anybody that I talk to about this, that, if you ever come up to me and you tell me that you are experiencing this thing, I might be taken back a little bit because I just didn't expect it coming or something, but I still love you. That never ever changes. And, yes, okay, you feel this way, now what? Like,
Right.
what do you do about those feelings? Are you telling me that you want to make the decision to, engage these feelings with action? Or, are you wanting to, be chaste and pray?
Yeah, like maybe every parent should have this little conversation with themselves and their spouse. What would we do? What will we do to be prepared if this were to occur in our home? Like how, or what is our posture of love and compassion, and how would we approach it, and where do we stand? And don't you think that it would, like you said, be something that you should think about ahead of time, like you are, and planning out what a response would be, a loving response would be. We plan out our loving responses for our unbelieving friends and family all the time. We're always thinking of how we're going to phrase things, when we're evangelizing our friends, because we want to make sure that we're welcoming, we're accompanying. Why aren't we doing this with our children?
Well, and so for our kids, we should not only just as a fundamental thing, we don't want to ever make them feel rejected, because when a child feels rejected, especially by their parents, that's an incredibly deep wound that leads to a lot of horrible things in the future. But not only that, but it also pushes them away from the church, and they get lost in the world. And I don't want that for my kids, and I don't want that for anybody else's kids either.
I've told my kids, because we get angry at our children every once in a while, but I've told them repeatedly, I might get disappointed momentarily at some choice that you've made, or I might be shocked by a choice that you've made, but nothing you'll ever do will make me not love you. And I think if we just continue to tell our children that, and our friends, I have many friends who are in this camp, many, and I love them, and I don't know how they're gonna, if they listen to this podcast, how they're gonna feel about it, but I love them, and I love my kids, and it's not gonna change.
I think something you just said highlights another really important point. You can say you love somebody all day. Nothing you do will make me stop loving you, which is a vital truth our children must understand. But take it a step further. Nothing you do will make me not want you around.
Yes.
Let's go there, guys.
Yes.
Let's go there. Okay, because there are people who are toxic in our lives who we have to love from afar. Let that never be our children, no matter what they come and say to us. Let that never be because of this type of situation. Because there are youth, there are entire ministries dedicated to rescuing these youths who are living on the street because their parents have said no more. I want my children to know there is literally not anything you could do that wouldn't make me want you and hunt you down and look for you.
And you know what? That's what God says to you.
Yes.
And that's why the church is open to you, regardless of somebody who is misguided in the church or isn't catechized fully in the teaching of what the church teaches here. You are welcome in the Catholic Church because God loves you and He wants you here no matter what. And as always, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Join us again in 2 weeks.
Until then, may God bless you and may Mary accompany you.